folks, we're going to use this video to give a brief demonstration on the use of NASA's official version of Google Docs called G Suite on the preparation and tracking of proposal evaluations. And so by now, you should all be very familiar with the folder for your panel, within which you find a folder for each individual proposal, a scoring sheet, a tracking sheet, reference material, and a bunch of stuff. For the purposes of this demonstration, we're just going to be concerned with the tracking sheet and a proposal folder. And so the first thing you need to do is open up the tracking sheet. And in this case, for the demonstration, we're going to work with the proposal submitted by Jane Smith. And you can see by looking at the tracking sheet that this checkbox under Discussed has been checked, and under the status comments it says Discussed and Ready for Primary. In this case, the primary is Al Einstein. And so when Al is ready to draft the first version of the evaluation, he puts his initials in the box for primary, and he changes the status comments to something like AE is drafting. That way, anyone who looks at the tracking sheet will know that Al is working on the first draft as primary for this proposal evaluation. And so Al's going to go back over, open up the proposal folder, and there are going to be a lot of other documents in here, the individual evaluations, the compiled doc, etc. But he's going to open up the one called blank. Now he might also want to open up the one that says notes, which is where the executive secretary took the notes during the discussion. He might want to refer to that or copy and paste even. And so he opens up the blank to draft the evaluation. The first step that he takes is to change the name from blank to AE, his initials. So he got rid of the word blank and added his initials. The second step, and this will only need to be done once by the primary, is change notifications to none. Now, for the first time through, the primary can be in editing mode. Editing is similar to just typing up a Word document. Suggesting mode, which we will use heavily, is the same as turning on track changes in a Word document. So the first time through, it can be in editing mode because nothing's in here yet. So Al looks at the notes of the panel discussion and he puts in his proposal summary. He scrolls down to the strengths and weaknesses, enters something for the strengths and weaknesses. Now, maybe there were no minor strengths, and so he puts none noted. And we don't want that in bold. Major weaknesses. Minor weakness. Now, he can also scroll right past any of the voting information because you have not voted yet. Now, you are going to enter whether it was relevant or not because that's something you discussed. If no, you're going to describe whatever the relevance issue was. Same with cost. Yes or no. If no, fill out the reason. Same with data management plan. The other thing that the primary can enter here in the first draft is any comments or suggestions for the proposer that the panel came up with, and any notes to NASA. You can also have none noted in those fields. And so let's say Al is now done. He exits out of that document, make sure his initials are on the end, goes over to the example tracking sheet, and he highlights his initials green. Changes the status comments to something like ready for secondary. So the secondaries on this proposal can look at this and know that it's ready for one of them to pick up. Doesn't matter what order, whoever has time. Let's say Stevie Hawking was one of the secondaries. He's going to pick it up to work on. So he's going to enter his initials and say SH is working on. So he hasn't highlighted it, which means it's in his hands, and he's put a comment that he's working on it. And so I closed this out for a reason. He's going to pick up AE version because he can look at the tracking sheet and know that that's who had it last. That's the last version. He's going to open it up, and the first thing that Stevie Hawking is going to do is change the name. And so he's going to click inside that box with the name. He's going to backspace out the AE, and he's going to add his initials, SH. Now, one of the most important steps now is he's going to change into suggesting mode. This is the equivalent of track changes so that everyone can see what's been changed. Let's say Stevie doesn't like that last blah, and he wants it to end with yada yada. You'll notice that it shows up here. There's also a spot for anyone who follows to respond to that comment or that change. He can also say, make a comment. So you highlight an area of the text, you click on the little plus, and you say, there are just too many blahs. Okay? Now, I'm going to show you how to reply to that in the next iteration. But Stevie goes through and he does whatever he wants. He rewords it. He changes that to yada yada. And so on and so forth. When he's done, he closes the file out. We never want more than one person working in a file at a time. I'm going to save a step for the purposes of this demonstration and not close it out each time, but you do need to close it out each time. When Stevie's done, he goes over here, highlights his initials green, and says, again, ready for secondary, or ready for SC2, or however you want to indicate that it's ready for the next person. So let's say Zach Newton is the second secondary. Zach puts his initials to let everyone know he's working on it, and to be explicit, he's going to put in ZN is editing. Everyone knows it's in Zach's hands now. Zach goes over, opens up the document. First thing he does is change the name to his initials. Now, it's very important for you to know that each time you close a document and reopen it, it actually defaults to editing mode. And so the first step after you change the file name is to make sure you're in suggesting mode, because the group chief wants to see all your edits. So let's say Zach is perfectly fine with all these changes that Stevie made. He can actually say, I'm fine with this. Okay? And he can go down and make his own edits. He remembers that there was a minor strength, and he puts that in here. Okay? And he's done with it. So he closes out the file and he goes back to the tracking sheet and he highlights his initials green and changes the status to ready for group chief. And so let's say the group chief is Mary Curie. Mary's going to pick that up. She could say group chief is editing, her initials, MC is editing, whatever you want to say to indicate that it's in this person's hands. So Mary opens it up. And the difference with what the group chief does versus the other panelists is they can do this in editing. Now, I do want to point out before we go any further that you can send stuff back and forth to each other, and how you indicate that, whether it's speaking to the person, whether you come up with your own highlighting scheme within this section, that is up to you. It's entirely up to you. You can use the same highlights. You can highlight a field red if you want Stevie to look at it again, so on and so forth. The group chief can highlight their initials red and say the primary needs to look at again. Regardless, when the group chief is pretty happy with things, they can go through and make a clean copy. And so the first thing they're going to do, enter their initials. Mary enters her initials here and lets it default to editing. And that way, she can go in and she can clean this thing up. So she can say, okay, I agree with that, but I really want it to just say yada yada, and that's all it's going to say. This is creating a clean version. But you have the record in there for the group chief to look over and make sure that the panel evaluation reflects the actual true discussion of the panel. At this point in time, either the group chief can leave this blue text and say, Executive Secretary, get rid of it, or the group chief can just get rid of it. Let's say the group chief doesn't like this change. They can actually not accept it so that it defaults back to the first way it was written, blah, blah, blah. So we never want to accept changes or resolve comments until it's in the group chief's hands. All right? Okay. So the group chief has gone through and cleaned this up and made sure it truly reflects the comments of the panel. Okay? And so they're going to go through and they're going to delete all the blue text. I'm not going to go through it all. You get the idea. And they're going to have a wonderfully clean copy that you're going to pull up and project and read over when you're ready to vote. And so once the group chief is satisfied that they're to that point, they're going to go over to the tracking sheet, highlight their initials green, and they're going to change the comment to ready to vote. Now, anyone can look at this tracking sheet and know that the group chief has produced a clean copy that they are satisfied with, and it's ready to project to the group and vote. Now, just a reminder that the first time you get to this point on the first proposal you vote on, that we want a program officer in the room to help you through the process. Okay? Now, once that has been pulled up and voted on, the executive secretary can record the votes on this panel evaluation. Down at the bottom, fill out who was present, who was voting, anybody who was present and not voting, which includes a program officer if they're in the room. And so they're going to fill this part out. They're going to make sure that those scores translate to an adjectival rating, which your score sheet does for you, by the way, and they're going to put it in here. Now, just backspace through whatever box and put a big X. Don't get fancy, even though you can have some real fun with Google Docs. Just put an X. So, once the votes have been recorded, all the information is here, all the blue italicized text has been deleted. It is actually ready for the program officer. And so, previously, the program officers were kind of spying on you and keeping an eye on where this was at, but they knew it wasn't ready for them because this box had not been checked and it said ready to vote. And so once you have voted, this box needs to be checked, and you will change the comment to ready for PO1. That's when the program officers get very excited to start editing proposal evaluations. And so let's say I have the most time at the moment, and I'm going to pick that one up and I'm going to look at it. So I put my name or my initials under PO1, and I say PO1 is editing. And so this has been closed out. I go into it. I change the name to show my initials. I make sure that I'm in suggesting mode, and I start editing. And so most of the time I'm going to have comments, although I might add some wonderful words like adequately or significantly or insufficiently, so on and so forth. Most of the time I'm going to have a question for you or some type of comment. So I might say this, I'm just going to put blah, 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 but I might say that you have evaluative statements. Anyway, I'm going to make a comment. I might add some words. I might put the word adequately in here and hopefully spell it right. I might make another comment and say something like, I don't see the weakness here. This is a statement. Regardless, I'm going to be making comments. And when I'm ready for you to look at my comments, I'm going to go over here and I'm going to highlight my initials red. And I am going to change the status comment to back to panel. So you're going to be looking for things that are highlighted red over in the column PO1 and PO2. That indicates an action item for you. It's ready for you to be picked up again and worked on. Now, normally, it's the primary who's going to pick these up and work on again. But you can work that out between the group chief and the primaries and the individual panelist on how you want to handle that. Normally, the primary picks it up and makes the comments or the changes, responds to the comments or makes changes. So let's say Alice picked that up again. He's editing it. He goes into the file. He changes it back to his initials. Make sure he's in suggesting mode. The most important thing to remember at this step is when you get comments back from any program officer, whether it's PO1 or PO2, never, ever, ever accept changes or resolve comments. And so you're not going to resolve this comment. You're going to respond to it. So if you click on the box, not on resolve, but anywhere else, it's going to bring up an area for you to reply. You can actually say, okay, I agree. Or you can disagree and you can tell me why you disagree. You enter your response and you hit reply. You do not resolve. Even if I've just added a word like adequately, you do not accept it or reject it. You leave it there. If it's something minor and you say nothing, I'm going to assume you agree with it. But you can also say, okay, same here. Here's a comment. I disagree, and here's why. All right? So the important lesson here is that you do not accept any changes and you don't resolve any comments. Let's say you really did accidentally leave some blue text in there. I'm going to say, please delete. Okay? And so when this is in Al's hands, I may have already said please delete, but he can respond to that and say okay, or he can flat delete that, go ahead and make the edit, right? But don't resolve the comment. In other words, this is like back in the days when evaluations were done on paper and someone just threw away all the previous copies. So the program officers never knew what they said and they'd make you go dumpster diving for the previous copies. That is the equivalent if you accept changes or resolve comments. We don't know what we told you and we don't want to reread the whole thing and make a whole new set of comments. We want to see what we already told you. And so Al would leave it like this. He's responded, he's made edits, and he's done. So let's say I asked you to make an edit here. Al could do that, but he doesn't resolve anything. And so he's done with that. He closes it out, he goes back to the tracking sheet, and he highlights this blue and says, back to PO1. And so I'm going to be watching for my initials to turn blue. That means it's back in my hands. Okay? Now this part you will never see, but when I pick this up, I'm still going to change it to my initials. I'm going to go in here, move that stupid download out of the way, and I am going to make a clean copy for PO2. And so in this case, I'm going to go through, I've looked at everything you said. Even when you disagreed with me, I'm either going to comment back or I'm going to say, okay, I understand that. Let's say that's the case. I'm going to resolve that. And so I'm going to go in here and you have done everything I've asked. You've responded in some way or another. If it's minor, let's say you didn't say anything, I'm going to assume you're okay with it. And I am going to go in and I'm going to make a clean copy for PO2. When I'm done, I'm going to close it out. I'm going to turn my initials green. And I'm going to change the comment to ready for PO2. So I think you get the idea now. Let's say Jeff picks it up. He's going to enter his initials. He's going to say Jeff is working on it. And he's going to go in and make his edits. Let's say he loved it the way it is. Highly unlikely. We all know that. But let's say he did. And he just wants you to make one minor change. He wants you to get rid of that. Yeah, he just turned it back to the way it was before I edited. And so most of the time, if it's a minor change, he's just going to have you make it final. But let's say he had significant changes. He's going to do the same thing. He's going to turn it red. Al's going to pick it up again, work on it, address his comments, turn it blue. Jeff knows it's ready for him. Jeff is happy with it. Let's say he had one more minor change. He might even make a comment up at the top. Accept changes and make final. Okay? And so at this point in time, it was JNG. He was in suggesting mode. He said accept changes and make final. There's only one minor change. But he goes ahead and turns it green. And he changes the comment to accept changes and make final. And so Al's going to pick that up again. And he's going to see this and he's going to go, woohoo! Now this is the one time you've been given permission to accept changes, so you're going to resolve that. You're going to scan the entire document to make sure that you've accepted all the changes. You are going to change the name to final. Oops. I did not mean to do that. You're going to change the name to final. You're going to double check one last time that you've got a clean copy. We're pretending there's no blue italicized text. You're going to go back over to the example tracking sheet, and then you get the wonderful satisfaction of saying done, and you can just say it's final. And that's it. So that is a demonstration on how to use G Suite, NASA's official version of Google Docs to edit, draft, edit, and track proposal evaluations. There's a slight learning curve, but once you get the hang of it, it will be second nature. And of course, if you have any questions, come see your friendly program officers. Thank you so much.